Hello, I'm Cory.
And I'm Isaac.
And I'm Ben.
That was a little loud.
No, that's perfect. That was perfect. Just fucking run with it.
And we're here to talk about movies.
So we have to introduce our good friend Ben, who is here with us for this episode, because he has some knowledge of the movie we're going to be discussing this week. And also, we like him. We think he's got some thoughts worth sharing, and he's just, in general, a pretty cool guy with some cool thoughts. And
he knows about psychology, which is pertinent to this movie.
True, yeah. That's his area of expertise, in fact.
Yes.
That's him right there. I meant a few words.
Check me out on Hinge.
All right, Ben. Ben, do you want to say anything first to introduce yourself at all?
Well, yeah, so I'm Ben. You know, there's so much I could say about myself, but I like to leave it at the enigma level.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, we never say anything about ourselves except that Isaac went to Austria, so.
Nothing.
You have some good sausage there, Isaac?
I had some schnitzel. They don't do sausage. Sausage is the German thing. Actually, they do sausage as well.
Why'd you just lie?
Because they mostly do schnitzel. That's like the cuisine. So I don't know. I have more schnitzel than sausage.
What is schnitzel?
It's a shank of meat. I don't actually completely know what the word shank means, but I think it is like a cut of meat.
You shank somebody with a shiv.
Well, yeah, that as well. But so okay, it's a cut of meat that is deep fried and very salty, and it's very plain. But when it's well done, it's just deep fried meat, and you can't go wrong with that. It's a high ceiling, low floor kind of food.
My mouth is watering just thinking about it.
All right.
That's my goal.
So anyway.
Speaking of which.
Me and Ben went to this concert. You want to share your experience on that?
Yeah. I think I was just hanging out on, a weekday night. Classic. Just working on my guns as per usual. Anyways,
his muscles.
Cory, yeah, I don't support guns. Ban all guns. Anyways, Cory comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, do you want to go to this concert?" And as any good American boy, I say yes. Why not? And so we go.
Such a good boy.
It was a good time. It was at the Showbox, right?
Yes.
On First. Yeah, for any out of the state listeners, it's a nice venue in Seattle, Washington, where we live. Anyways,
98105. Represent.
I think it's 98125, actually.
That's our zip code, right?
That's our zip code.
Shit, I've been putting 05.
Yeah.
I guess they just figured that out,
Yeah, no, everyone has our zip code.
Don't worry about
This isn't the radio. We could cut that out.
Fuck, this isn't the radio. I'm in the wrong place.
So anyway, we went to this concert, and Ben had never heard the music before, but it was the music of Sun, which is the drone metal band from Seattle that dresses up in these black robes and plays with almost nothing except for extremely loud, distorted, droning guitars, with each note playing about a solid 30 seconds for each one.
Which feels like an eternity when you're in there.
Yeah.
And the costuming, you said it was almost like a
satanic cult.
Yes.
I think. For everyone around me, I gotta say it was like a religious experience for them. Yeah. Have you ever seen I Am Legend and he walks into that dark room and they're the zombies just huddled over going like, yeah. That's what all these people look like listening to this.
That's a scary scene, so it must have been a scary place.
Yeah, it was a scary place.
I mean, it was hypnotizing, You're just like trying to understand what's going on, and it's just like a wall of sound that just cuts you to your core. It's pretty terrifying.
About 30 minutes in, though, it turns from me trying to understand it to me just trying to survive it.
Okay.
Which is fun in its own way, but I really was a test of my mental fortitude, I gotta admit. Good time, though.
Yeah.
Would recommend.
All this to say that band's music is pretty intense. Is that fair to say?
It's not even intense. It's just unlike other music that we listen to, right?
Unpleasant.
Yes, it's unpleasant.
Okay.
It's different. It's very different.
They also are some Cheech and Chong looking motherfuckers.
What does that mean?
They look like Cheech and Chong.
They just look like normal white dudes. What do you mean? No? Okay.
I thought you said they looked like greasy basement dwellers a little bit.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're like metal
Yeah, I mean, they have
musicians.
like
so-
wiry beards.
I know what Cheech and Chong look like.
Dude, fucking.
They had beards. One of them had a
he
beard.
looks like-
Anyway,
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Big bushy boys.
Looks
So,
exactly the same. I don't know why he's fighting me so
the-
hard on this.
I don't know.
He's not fighting you that hard on this.
Pull up a picture of the two band members, Greg Anderson and what's the other guy's name? It's the two N's. Okay,
Cheech
I can see it.
and Sean.
I can
Yeah. Almost indistinguishable, in fact.
I can see it.
Are we certain that that's not an alter ego?
Yeah, no, honestly, it could be.
Is he still in jail, the dude?
Cheech?
Yeah.
Or Chong? I don't know.
No, the other dude, Tommy Chong.
Tommy
Chong.
Chong?
Yeah, he was in jail, right? He went to jail for like drug possession. I thought
Oh.
Jail.
Wait, they do drugs?
that's like their whole thing.
Yeah. It's funny because it's the only thing I know about Cheech and Chong.
Legal issues.
There you go.
Oh, okay. That's why everyone goes to jail. That's the...
Drug traffic.
Nice. Selling drug paraphernalia, mostly bongs.
Yeah.
Operation Pipe Dreams, everybody.
There you go.
That's beautiful.
So
Okay.
anyway,
So Cheech and Chong are on stage and everyone's praying Satan to him.
Yes.
Okay.
the very tenuous connection here is that the movie Joker is scored by Hildegard, an Icelandic composer.
Why don't you give that one another try?
Hildegard. There we go.
No, I think it's Benedict Cumberbatch. That's okay. That's a common mistake. Don't worry about that one.
God, I've never seen it spelled out before.
Anyway,
This composer worked with the band,
yes,
right?
on their last album called Life Metal. She's like a vocalist and cellist, so there's some like creepy vocal stuff.
And you must
in a
have
couple
heard
songs.
some of that music at the show because it's their most recent album.
No, because she was
Oh.
not there, so they didn't play that. I mean, I
They
don't
just
know
didn't play
what
the
songs.
album.
You know, how would anyone know what songs?
You just don't know
they're
what's what.
playing? Yeah.
Okay, but still, maybe somewhat along the same vibe wavelength. I mean, the music that she provides for the movie is alien and sort of dissonant.
I'd say, like the movie itself, like the show itself, it was unpleasant.
Yeah.
The movie and the show, very similar in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That's
But
a good
also
point.
strangely like beautiful in this
Yeah,
weird
yeah,
kind
definitely.
of way.
There's an interesting quality about that new album with her on it that is kind of uplifting, and breaking down music into its most basic elements is similar to how I think she scores the film Joker, because it is unobtrusive but really present when it needed to be.
Yeah.
There's moments of beauty and there's moments of evoking the like horror of what was on screen.
Discomfort. And
Yeah.
so-
And just in a physical sense, right? The kind of drones, right? A lot of long single note patterns. Not a lot of like 80s synth keyboards or things like that.
Mhm, yeah.
Very bare bones.
So her music is lent well to the film Joker.
Yes.
Todd Phillips' new take on the classic DC supervillain that you might have heard of. It's going around the block, popular with the kids these days. And it made a lot of money last weekend and has stirred up quite a bit of controversy after winning the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival, the top honor at one of the most prestigious film festivals in the world. First comic book movie ever to be entered into that festival or have any kind of serious presence there. And it wins the top honor. As it gets further and further towards wide release, the opinions on it start coming out and being a whole lot more polarized. There's obviously been a lot of talk about this movie, so
Yeah.
we're here
I
to
think-
talk more about it.
I think that's one of the more interesting things going into the film. You're not really knowing which way you're going to go on it. I feel like if you are privy to dark, edgy film, then you're probably...
Like us.
Yeah, like us. You're probably going to be okay with it, right? It's not going to be completely outside of what you're seeing. If you're expecting like the, 50s, 60s Joker, 60s Joker.
Adam West.
If you're expecting the 60s Joker, at this point, you're probably living in a hole, because even the 80s version...
Yeah, how did
there's
you
been a
miss the
dark-
Jared Leto version?
yeah, exactly.
Everyone is
Peak
talking about it.
pinnacle
Peak
Joker.
Yeah. Have you seen Suicide Squad, Ben?
Yeah.
Can you speak to the Jared Leto Joker? Because that's one that I'm not going to be able to speak to at all.
So I think the thought process was kind of throwback to Jack Nicholson Joker, where he's more of a mobster, less lunatic, and more just gangster who's edgy. It's been a while since I've seen Suicide Squad, and surprisingly, I only saw it once.
That's not surprising at all. I think the main criticism was that he's just not in the movie very much. It was hyped up that his character was going to be in the movie, the Joker character, and then it hardly was at all.
When he was there, he was edgy. And I think that is the common thread of all the Jokers, is that they're all edgy.
I mean, at least the film adaptation versions.
Yeah, I think that probably the comic book Joker, and I mean, I've played the Batman Arkham games, so, you know, I have a fair amount of exposure to different forms of Joker.
Hamill's Joker is pretty edgy, I gotta say. Yeah.
Different kinds of edgy, maybe, but like edgy, right?
Yeah. And varying degrees of well done edgy, too.
So where on the edgy spectrum does Joaquin Phoenix's Joker fall under?
Max edge?
Yeah, probably the most edgy.
But how so? Is that a criticism that you're leveling?
You look at it and your finger cuts. You start bleeding. It's so edgy.
It's pretty edgy.
I think Joaquin's Joker is a nice mix of believable, but to an extreme that maybe the others haven't done so much before. Because you get to see more of his inner thoughts, what really drove him to become his character. So I think you get more of the relate to.
Yeah, and a lot of the talk around this movie has surrounded the question of whether it's like a sympathetic view of him as a human being. Is it supposed to make you empathize with this psychopath? And if it does, then is that a problem? Like, a lot of people would say yes. I think that kind of ties into what you're saying, right? Because it like gets into his head. One of the big questions to answer about this movie is, does it do so successfully in a way that is somehow like productive to conversations about how society works? Or is this just a regressive movie about an mentally ill incel who resorts to violence to live out his power fantasies, and it's going to end up just inciting more violence and vitriol than it does provoke actual valuable discussion?
So my question is, do you think that it's the latter?
No, but I think that there is enough there in the movie for someone who goes into it with that in mind to latch onto those elements of it and run with them. Like, I don't think that the opposite is portrayed quite substantially enough. The little bits of yuckiness are kind of left festering a little bit. Maybe just because of an overall lack of knowing exactly what he was doing on the part of Todd Phillips. That's my very brief take on the matter.
I want to touch on 2 points there. I feel like empathizing is never bad. That's just natural to feel something for someone else. That is just part of being human. So I don't think in any circumstance that's bad. Idolizing that, glorifying it, yeah, which I don't think it does. I don't think the movie glorifies the Joker. I think you're just supposed to glimpse into his madness and like understand it a little, but that's not the same. And then as far as inciting violence with incels and stuff, I think a lot of that could be from the media, the hype around it. It's like Stanford Prison Experiment. If you're expecting the role to be incels going crazy, murdering people, they might just act that way, not because of the movie itself, but because that's the role they think they're supposed to do at that point.
That's a fair point. I do want to say also that I did pick up on those elements that you mentioned before we watched it about possibly reading into like an incel justification for it. And while I definitely don't read it that way, there's things in the movie that I can see, like you said, Isaac, you can latch onto and think that is what it's talking about. Especially the dialogue, because it was less well written than it could have been. It came across in some places as a little cringy and a little underdeveloped, and that I think struck some of that incel vibe. Like, I come back to the first thing that he says in the movie, which is it just me, or are things getting crazier out there? It's kind of like throwaway lines like that strike me as a little amateurish. Jumping way ahead, the ending speech, which we've talked about a lot outside of podcast, maybe not making the most social commentary cohesive argument there.
Right, yeah, I think that all the problems that I have with the movie and all the parts where I agree with it as being like socially regressive has to do mostly with its insistence on partaking in social critique. And when it tries to do that, and we talked about this a little bit already, when it tries to do that, it usually comes across, like you just said, as quite underdeveloped and pretty blunt. There's the one line that I come back to at the finale where Arthur Fleck, the Joker, delivers his kind of manifesto in one line, and it was something like, what do you get when you cross a mentally ill loner with a society that treats him like shit? I'll show you what you get, or something. And like,
oh, you get what you deserve.
You get what you deserve, which maybe was just meant as part of his insanity, or part of him as a character having this perception of society as being so corrupt. But because of how it's framed, it kind of feels like he's making a call to arms almost, which I think is a lot of why some people have pointed to the movie as being problematic, is for its tendency, not intentionally, but just by its own kind of cluelessness, to like accidentally serve as a call to arms for a very bad, yucky sect of our society. So is that a bad thing? Or is that even like the movie's fault, or is that our fault?
I'm just thinking about it as a way you could spin that. A lot of personality disorders, a huge symptom is that they don't blame themselves at all. Like, it's excuse after excuse. So it could just be a character building thing. Like, it's just more of his mental illness, and it's not saying anything greater than that. It's like, look at this guy who does a bunch of bad shit and then never blames himself, only ever blames everyone else.
Yeah. Classic narcissistic psychopath.
Yeah.
And that's definitely how I thought of it too. At the same time, I can understand the reading of seeing that as a justification for the actions, right?
Like
the importance and the repetition of the line, you get what you deserve, basically, right? They say it multiple times. Like the dude says it when he kills Thomas Wayne. He goes, you get what you deserve, or, you know, something like that. It's, yeah, exactly. The reading there, potentially for some people, could have been that was a justification, you know. This is everything, the horror that you're subjected to as a loner who society treats like garbage, and now you're justified in doing horrible actions.
Mm-hmm.
I think in consensus, we don't really know.
Right, yeah.
At the same time, I think we all read it as that psychopath view, right? That it's a look into the character and not supposed to be a social commentary.
I think that ultimately makes the movie more interesting and fun to watch, too, is if you just ignore anything that, like, Todd Phillips might be trying to say about society and just view it as the story of Joker.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Todd Phillips doesn't care about poor people, so...
Right, yeah. And
just like George Bush.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you try to watch this movie as some kind of well-reasoned social critique with something clear to say about society.
Yeah.
And what you come away with is the fact that Todd Phillips either has no idea what he thinks about society or has no idea how to convey that in film. And I know that the word society is sort of comically broad, but I don't know how to even really zoom in past that because the movie just isn't thoughtful about the social critique aspect. And so I think that is what is being viewed as problematic maybe by a lot of people, is just the fact that it tries so hard to and it just fails to. And because it fails to do that and is also about this potentially inflammatory subject matter, that's why it's problematic, is if that makes sense. Like, that's where the emptiness kind of comes from.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand that because I am still on the same page where I watched it pretty much as a gritty, dark, and mostly effective character study about the psychological deterioration of Arthur Fleck from doing really bad and being highly unstable, descending into complete psychopathy.
Is it psychopathy or psychopathy?
Psychopathy. There, now no matter which one it is, we can edit in the right pronunciation.
Yeah, as a dramatic character study, it works well for the most part. Great performance by Joaquin Phoenix, solid character arc that kind of slowly unveils the full madness. Another thing that we talked about before the show was the concept of him feeling trapped in what surmised a normal-ish life for him, and then later feeling free in basically realizing his true psycho self. An effectively disturbing and dark character study.
I think we maybe just have to say Todd Phillips isn't that good at making social critiques, but he is really good at making an interesting story, one that I was invested in the entire time.
I was also invested in it. He, at the very least, established a compelling tone that is completely unlike anything we've seen. I mean, you could say anything like we've seen before in a comic book movie, but it's honestly beyond that. Like, this is a darker, more unpleasant blockbuster than I've ever seen before. This movie made almost $100 million on its opening weekend, and it is almost aggressively unpleasant the entire way through. And whether or not you think there's any artistic merit in that, it's just kind of an impressive feat that it has managed to stir up so much interest and discussion and relevance while being such an unpleasant watch.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
Makes you feel bad.
It does, yeah. It makes you feel uncomfortable a lot of the time when he lets loose his just strained laughs. It just never gets old. The whole movie that makes you just curl up in a ball in your chest and like want to not listen to it anymore.
And I think another interesting thing that you hinted on at saying he established the tone well was that I was surprised how many things I had an issue with. Like, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about the Batman tie-ins, but a lot of small details that you're able to gloss over because the overall effect works so well and just pushes you along to the end with a constant feeling of disgust and dread almost at what the Joker is capable of.
Spoiler alert, he kills people.
Yeah. And is also really weird and scary.
Yeah, he's weird and scary. Joaquin Phoenix does some really freaky physical distortion stuff that you see a little bit in the trailers.
Yeah, let's talk about Joaquin's sexy stomach, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
I've been dying to talk about that.
Which is honestly sort of toned. Like, I think that the degree to which he is emaciated in this movie has been a tad overhyped because it seemed to me watching that most of what makes his body look so weird is like the way that he's holding himself and the way that he positions his shoulders and sucks his stomach in and just like twitches. It's not so much that he lost a lot of weight, although he probably lost a fair amount of weight as well. Yeah.
For anyone who hasn't seen it, he kind of looks like Gollum in a way.
yeah.
He does kind of do that, like, he does that, like, hunchback thing with his shoulders, right? He, like, sticks the back of his back out, and then the shoulders get, like, in a really weird, like, bony protrusion. It looks unnatural.
Yeah, it's like really if he had traps, it's invisible trap syndrome. Really trying to show off your traps, but you have none whatsoever, so then your just shoulder bones are sticking out disgustingly.
This actually, the movie before it was Joker related, the original screenplay treatment was just called Invisible Trap Syndrome.
Dude, I watched the fuck out of that.
Joaquin doesn't do sequels, but maybe if we just took all of the Joker stuff out of it and continued the story of this character, but called it that, he would sign on.
Okay. Has Joaquin Phoenix never done a sequel?
No, he's never done a sequel, and he claims he never will.
I respect that.
I think actually funny. I saw this in I think it was a Reddit comment. Maybe we can cut that out. Joaquin has very publicly announced his intention that he's never going to do a sequel, similar to Denzel Washington, who pronounced the same thing for the first 25 years of his career before he decided for some reason that he just had to give us The Equalizer 2.
Yeah, I know. Like, what the fuck?
Thank you, Denzel, for realizing when it was time to change your ways.
Anyway. But the real question is, have either of you seen The Equalizer 2?
No.
I've seen the really terrible YouTube ads that pop up all the time.
That doesn't count.
Oh, okay. then no.
So how do we know if it's bad?
True.
Based on the YouTube ads.
Okay, thank you.
It's probably good.
Cleared that up. If the YouTube ads look terrible, then it's bad.
Like, if you don't have 15 seconds of appealing material in your movie to put on YouTube, then that means you don't have a good movie.
Yeah. Or you're deliberately trying to turn us off from it or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Now I'm trying to think of a movie that I saw the trailers for and thought looked terrible, but then ended up really liking it, which I can't think of one.
I can't either. No. But
I think we're
there
all
probably are some
biased.
things. It's just because you don't remember bad trailers. You only remember good trailers.
Yeah, true.
So
no, Gemini Man.
Yes, Gemini Man.
That's a really bad trailer.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's a bad
and
trailer.
the new Terminator.
Yeah, that one's pretty bad. Too.
I'm going hunting.
I am the hunter.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, we'll see. If
Also,
that
me and
turns out.
Isaac have talked a couple times about the Zombieland 2 trailer.
Yeah.
Does not look great.
I'm just bummed because I wanted it to be good, but it's just one of those things where it's like 2-minute trailer doesn't really make me laugh. So how is a 2-hour?
I mean,
movie
cut
gonna-
out the terrible narration, and you never know.
Yeah.
Should
we'll
we
see.
go back and watch the first trailer for the first movie?
Maybe it was bad.
Compare.
maybe it was bad.
Yeah.
That's a good point. We should do that to maybe rekindle a little hope in ourselves for the next few days before Zombieland 2 comes out. But anyways, that was a tangent.
Yes. So it sounds like we all agree what parts we like and what parts we don't like about the Joker. So let's talk about a couple other things that we haven't mentioned. One thing I feel like we can get a lot on is why we all disliked the Batman tie-ins.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree somewhat.
Oh, okay.
There either should have been no Batman tie-ins or more. It should have either been not comic booky at all or more comic booky.
I think I agree with that assessment. I disliked the feel of them as like it just ended up in a very awkward place where the ones that were there felt out of place.
It's like one piece of bad kale in a kale smoothie. Kind of just throws it off a little bit.
That's a beautiful
An
analogy.
otherwise good kale smoothie. Yeah.
Interestingly, I read a review that it seems like a lot of people are unanimous that some of the Batman things are thrown in, but I read a review that positively commented on the end with the Bruce Wayne tie-in.
Well, actually, Ben commented on that in a way that I thought was pretty interesting. So, okay, let's run through them first, the Batman tie-ins that are in this movie. Because at first it feels like this is going to be a very separate story that just kind of ignores the Batman lore besides the fact that it stars Joker. And it feels like it's just going to focus entirely on his character. But then we start hearing the Wayne name dropped a few times. We actually think for a little while that Thomas Wayne might be Joker's dad, which would just be the worst twist ever.
Yeah.
And then it sort of reverse twists and makes you sigh in relief that they didn't try to pull that thing and make Joker Batman's brother, which would have just been so unnecessary and distracting. But then also, like, he thinks Thomas Wayne's his dad, so he goes to the mansion and ends up having this weird little interaction with a young Bruce Wayne, and then getting kicked off the property by presumably Alfred.
I think what we're leading to is that the fact that it's Thomas Wayne and Bruce Wayne kind of detracts from the cool story of the Joker.
Mhm.
Like, just name dropping like that. But the scenes themselves, I think, lend themselves to Joker's insanity. Like, I think they're cool show points where you get to see, like, just how weird he is. And, like, the fact that his mom was lying to him, and that's, like,
Yeah, the delusion.
so it was her craziness, too. But they could have done that with not Thomas Wayne. They could have done that with, like, another, just make up a name. It doesn't matter.
Didn't they have to change Thomas Wayne's character in order to make him seem more kind of a sinister, rich white man who doesn't care about poor people?
Trumpian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are those A-push terms, like tyrant, industry of tyrant of what?
Yes, I know. Tyrant of industry.
Or
there's like
Titan of
Robert
industry,
Baron.
and yeah, I don't know. Anyways, but Thomas Wayne's always been a philanthropist, like a really great guy. Bruce grows up in the shadow of him, kind of. It's like, you're never going to be like your father. And in this one, he's a total dirt bag, basically.
Right. Or, I mean, he might have good intentions, but he definitely comes across as an asshole.
Yeah.
Which maybe is a little bit because we're seeing him from a very different perspective than we have before.
At the same time, his entire character and that change is used to drive a citywide riot from the poor people against the rich overlords of the town.
And part of the brilliant social critique that underlies the
Yeah. Captain of Industry.
Captain of Industry, there's
versus
the term.
robber barons. Yeah, you're right.
Hell yeah. Captain of Industries are the good guys. So
Yep.
he's framed more as a robber baron. But no, he's not really framed as a robber baron, but he's framed as a person who really wants to be seen as a captain of industry and is sort of a tryhard who is actually very out of touch with the plight of the lower classes that he claims to be able to lift out of poverty.
And then another tie-in that ends up inciting the whole Joker appeal for the movie, essentially, is that he calls all poor people clowns. I mean, I guess it was important because it ended up having the riotous town dressing up in Joker masks. So it was obviously important to the story, but at the same time, it feels
ridiculous when he says that.
Corny,
when he says it on TV, he says something like, "Until they learn to be more well-behaved, all the people of that class will just be nothing more than a bunch of masked loonies," or something.
Yeah,
it's like,
I think
who the
he literally
hell would
says
ever
clowns.
say that?
Like,
right? Yeah.
So, I mean, the movie takes place 1981.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan was president. So, like, I don't know. I think you can call poor people clowns back
Maybe
in
so,
1981.
maybe so. I think probably Trump has called, Mexicans worse things than that while being president. So maybe the world is a crazier place than I'm giving it credit for.
Is it just me, or is it getting crazier out there?
Anyways, all those different Wayne tie-ins lead up to the big kind of money shots. So all these riots are taking place all over town, and in the midst of all that, we witness for the 12th time on the big screen the death of Bruce Wayne's parents at the hands of a mugger.
And so herein ties the who am I? Anyways.
Yeah. You gotta say herein sometimes.
wait, is it therein lies?
Therein lies. There we go. The truth. The Joker and Batman, they're a perfect pairing. They'll always be arch nemesis because they're like two sides of the same coin, right? They're both from tragic backstories, which this movie delves really well into for the Joker.
And I think makes the case that his backstory is way, way worse
than
Bruce Wayne's. Poor little Bruce Wayne.
I know, he fell into a cave and got scared by some bats.
That's not in this movie, dude. Come on.
Yeah. Spoilers for Batman Begins.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Batman Begins yet, highly recommend.
Turn this podcast off before Cory spoils it even more.
But anyways, they are just kind of two diverging paths. Maybe they started in a similar place. They could have ended up in the same place, but Batman uses his mental illness to fight crime and try and make the world a better place, and Joker uses his to make it a worse place.
You forget, though, that one is the son of the wealthiest man in the city, and the other is a poor nobody.
Well, so basically, to solve mental illness, just have a lot of money, okay?
Yeah, right. Well, okay, but I see what you're saying. Like, yes, there are big differences in their backgrounds, and I don't know if I necessarily buy that as like a super valid parallel, but I believe that it was the intention, definitely.
Not even of this movie, though. That's
of like going back.
That's
canon.
I mean. Yeah.
No, I just mean like I think maybe when Batman was written originally, and that was conceived as like a dichotomy between those two characters. Okay, like I guess they're two sides of the same coin, but like Bruce Wayne is a hell of a lot more like privileged than the Joker character.
I don't know. That just kind of lends to the argument that with the right environment, it doesn't need to end up where Joker goes. Like, right. I don't think that actually detracts at all.
Interesting.
And it's really well done in The Dark Knight. He says, unstoppable force, immovable object. He's saying the same shit. We're two heads of a double-headed penis. We're both from the same shaft. So, like, I don't know.
Wow. That's
Mom.
gonna have to be in the podcast because of how well articulated that was, despite the fact that you used a penis analogy.
Okay, so anyway, the scene in The Joker, Bruce's parents get killed. We've all seen it many times. But this one, I think Bruce's reaction is really what maybe Todd Phillips was going for. He might have been trying to use that theme that has been in Batman canon since the beginning. Bruce is unfazed almost when his parents are killed. He's just like standing there. So like that could be shock, or it could be a glimpse into Bruce also being a little crazy.
Or both, because I mean the shock of a traumatic incident like that would scar you for life and leave you just shaken beyond comprehension, right?
One of potentially many inciting incidents that eventually lead to mental illness. the combination of everything, just like for the Joker, that it wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of a lot of really shitty things. And usually having this one inciting incident of tragedy. Like for the Joker, they talk about he was abused as a child and had brain injuries. That was probably a big early thing that happened.
Yeah.
And his mom was also pretty psycho. So the things mixing up to become a mental illness.
Yeah.
And for Bruce Wayne, it's his parents getting
For
killed.
Bruce, it could have snowballed from there. It didn't. But yeah, for the Joker, it did from his childhood. Yeah.
And that's cool. I think the first time you explained that to me, I bought it. And then you just got me back to buying it again. I just don't think that in this movie there was enough there to
I don't think
draw
it
that
works.
parallel.
Yeah.
That lends itself well to the argument that maybe if there was a little bit more there, if they had leaned more into that, it could have worked nicely. But it ended up in this awkward middle ground where it felt like it was trying to be totally disconnected and independent from that, but then was also a little bit too interested in involving those big name characters.
Yeah.
So like the things that this movie does well aren't necessarily anything super new or out of the ordinary. Like it depicts the deterioration of Arthur Fleck's mental state until he sort of snaps and becomes the Joker, which is a downward spiral arc that we've seen many times in movies. It's not really news to us as a society that when mentally ill people do not receive the support that they need from the social constructs that are supposed to support them, they can end up spiraling down very dark holes, right? I mean, like that is nothing newsworthy, but it's just the grittiness and darkness and like the unapologetic uncomfortableness that this movie exudes that makes it work really well and makes it feel very compelling despite the fact that it is a story that's been done many times before.
Yeah, and I think even if some of the choices are questionable of what to include and what we are seeing and literally being told in the story, the overall execution was just very well done from a film standpoint. It was well directed, well acted. Scored well. Yeah, everything that was bad was not distracting from an overall high quality.
They might have distracted in the moment for me a few times. Like it was enough for me to laugh at the movie a little bit, but nothing to derail the experience. Like I was still bought in.
The scene right before he kills the 3 Subway Wayne Enterprises people, when the guy's singing "Send in the Clowns," I thought that was another very cringy moment.
Yeah, like what dude is gonna sing with full verse? I don't know, like all of the words correct.
And it's not even a throw-in because they later play the song "Send in the Clowns" in the credits, and he says on the talk show they couldn't hold a tune to save their life. Yeah,
if we didn't know the Joker was a clown before, we definitely do now.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a clown.
Yeah.
Another one for me was when he's writing in his journal and it says the hardest part about having a mental illness is having to act like you don't.
Yeah.
Which is a valid statement and is honestly probably worth thought and consideration.
An exploration in a movie.
But it's kind of done like a Tumblr post.
In the movie. Like
in the movie, yeah.
In the movie.
And yeah, it's so in your face about it too. It's just like you could have maybe come to that idea had the viewer think that for themselves.
Yeah, I think
Right.
you would have
Oh, yeah.
without
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And you just are forced to watch him write it. And it's like,
Right.
ugh, this makes me cringe.
But
Like,
at the
yeah.
same time, that was something to him that he thought was a joke, right? He thought
Yeah.
that was funny. Not that it wasn't true, because obviously it was true for him. But every joke that he made was just like a horrible truth about his life, basically.
I hope at least my death makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
More sense than his life.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, his life's a comedy, not a tragedy. So yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. How all those big Tumblr posty things that he says a few times over the course of the movie, like the "my life's a comedy, not a tragedy" thing,
And like the comedy club scene
Right,
with all
right.
those horrible
they're all
jokes.
intentioned as jokes, which I hadn't really thought about before. That is his joke notebook. So that's kind of interesting, I guess.
It's kind of like making a thesis statement and then not writing your body paragraphs, right? Like it's you're not supporting your argument very well. Only in this one respect, because
Yeah.
I think the movie as a whole is
Or-
freaking great. But
I honestly think that it had the body paragraphs to back up those statements, but it just unnecessarily also had those short little summary blips that like said in words the things that the movie was getting across anyways just through watching it.
It's like how they told us your conclusion paragraph should just be your intro paragraph, but backwards or whatever, just restated.
Yeah,
that's
we've definitely
totally
referenced
bullshit, by the way. Like that's a terrible way to write.
It's funny that we've also actually referenced middle school writing techniques on this before when we talked about Mr. Omen.
Yeah.
It's really ingrained in me. Like I wake
it
up in
is.
sweats. Tootsie Roll paragraphs. Tootsie Roll paragraphs.
And it's not like it doesn't make good writing. It just makes very bland.
Explicit. I mean, I know where they teach it in middle school. I can understand why it's taught at a certain point. But
Get
anyway,
your thoughts across.
right.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about.
Oh, but speaking of actually, that's a really good segue into one other thing I wanted to touch on, which is the way that the movie frames itself. It uses these classical Hollywood title sequences at the beginning and the end of the movie that feel like a totally out of another place and time. It's like this cursive font and symphonic music that doesn't really fit the tone of the rest of the movie, right? And that's how we enter the world of Joker, and then that's also how we leave it. So it is framed almost like this conventional Hollywoody character story.
Yeah.
And then everything in the middle is familiar in terms of the arc of the character, but the actual grittiness and darkness and discomfort of the experience is so alien from that of anything that you would have seen in the era when those title sequences were actually in vogue, right?
Yeah.
Piggybacking off of that, Isaac, it's framed in a very natural way. I keep saying it's like a hero's journey kind of story. What are those? Coming of age, too.
Yeah.
But it's just like so incredibly twisted and perverted. But like there's still, you're seeing a character go from a place of deep sadness, getting to a place where he comes off as happy and free and powerful. He goes from having no power to being the most powerful man in Gotham when we exit the movie. So it is straight up a arc, a journey that we've all been on before, but it's whoa. Yikes, like the dark version.
Yeah.
What I wanted to add to that was thinking off of what both of you are saying, in that it feels natural, even though it has these classic titles and is set in the 80s, it doesn't feel like a retro throwback. It's framed and presented in a very natural way, and the 80s surroundings of the movie just feel like normal life. And I think that lends to its modern relevance as a character study, right? Not as a social commentary, but the positioning of the classic titles with the 80s setting, ultimately that anachronistic feeling makes it feel out of time and thus able to be consumed without feeling like a nostalgia of any kind. The majority of movies that are set in the 80s nowadays are very nostalgia throwbacks. Just like movies in the 80s, there was a lot of 50s nostalgia, right? It's almost like those two things are combined.
Every 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. Every 30 years.
Chapter 3.
Those two things are like combined and ultimately negate each other. It feels like we're out of time.
It's just a story.
It's just a story, exactly. Yeah. There we go.
That happens to be set in the 80s, which is incidentally exactly what the explanation that Todd Phillips gave was. He said that he set Joker in the 80s only because he didn't want it to have any association with the DC extended universe movies, which is really funny because of how incredibly expensive it is to make a movie that is set in the past. Like, to make a period piece, the amount of extra costuming and set design work that has to go into making it believable and accurate to the time period, it blows a movie's budget through the roof compared to what just setting it in the modern day would be. So, like, he must have lied to the producers and said there was another reason why it needed to be in the 80s, because, like, they would not have bought that. They would have been like, no, we're going to save $50 million and set it in present day instead.
I think the reason for it was to have Thomas Wayne and family fleeing the movie theater as they were watching Zorro the Gay Blade. I think for that one joke, that's
wait, were they watching Zorro the Gay Blade?
I think so.
It was on the theater title.
And they
Yo,
ran
what
out
kind
of
of
the theater.
family outing was that?
Well, so I mean, have you seen that movie?
No, it's not a porno.
No.
Oh, I thought it was.
It's honestly pretty homophobic, but it's just
Okay.
it's Zorro, but he's flamboyant. Like that's it.
It's like a comedy.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, interesting.
It's not a good movie. But,
Okay.
yeah.
But I want to have a whole episode on it. Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds wonderful.
Watch out for that one.
We will
Watch
be
out
on
for
the
the Gay
lookout.
Blades.
I bet Todd Phillips loves that movie. Like, he probably thinks it's so funny. That douchebag. That's probably why he put it in there on the sign. Oh, I love this movie from the 80s.
I remember being in the 80s and watching Zorro the Gay Blade
With all my bros.
With my bros.
That shit was so funny. The dude, the main character, is so fucking gay. Yeah, that's Todd Phillips' impression, everyone.
That's pretty good.
Thank you.
Average white douche, yeah.
But you know what? There's some valuable conversation to be had that is sparked by Joker. So we can thank Todd Phillips for that, I think, even though there are plenty of folks out there saying that this movie contributes nothing but bad vibes and vitriol to our society. I've had enough cool conversations about it already to justify its own existence. Isaac Handelman has talked about it enough to justify the movie's existence. Close the book. End of story.
And it's not even in a way that like Fortnite you see everywhere and you just see it and you groan like, oh, Fortnite, it's everywhere. Now that we've seen it, we can understand the hype and we are getting a real
And the
conversation
controversy,
about it.
right,
Yeah, yeah. We understand why it's hype just because of, its marketing. But at the same time, it has a real conversation to be held.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's the kind of movie where even though it's polarizing, if you are being honest with yourself, I think you can see both sides of it, right? Like, it's not the kind of movie where you're just going to go in, watch it, and be like, I don't know how anyone dislikes this movie. Like, it was so good. Or you're not going to go in and be like, oh my God, this movie is disgusting and, like, despicable. And, like, anyone who likes it, I just think must be an incel who, like, wants to be the Joker. I think that either way, if you're a reasonable human, you're going to be able to see where both of those extreme reactions come from, and it's really interesting because of all the different extreme reactions that it can provoke.
It is unpleasant and probably offensive in many ways, but at the same time it's doing that on purpose. It's very uncompromising, and in that sense it is an artistic success, right? It is achieving a feeling that it was set out to create.
Or not even necessarily a feeling it was set out to create, but just it's provoking a feeling in people. It is making people think.
The point of art is to make people feel, right? I felt a lot during this movie.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It did definitely succeed.
Yeah, I think the one argument about this movie that I don't buy is that it was hollow or pointless, because the amount that it has already resulted in, society holding up a mirror to itself is pretty cool. There has been so much thought put into this movie already, and so many different perspectives shared, and like so many different people thinking about things that they probably wouldn't have thought about otherwise because this movie exists. So like, cool. That gives a thumbs up for me.
And certainly an unusual feat for a comic book movie, quotation. For
Cory's air quoting
air
right
quotes,
now.
there we go.
For those not watching.
Thank you. We're going to have you back on the show, I think, every time to say Cory's air quoting.
Cory's air quoting
Yeah.
right now. I'll have a full-time gig.
Oh, yeah, dude. Once this
Yeah,
thing's
you'll get our cut of $20 million an episode.
Yeah, dude. Dude, we got 350 likes on that recent Instagram post
I
that we
saw
paid to promote,
that.
man. And
Hey, if you haven't followed them yet, what's your Instagram?
About Movies CI.
Wow, look at that. It's kind of a similar title to the podcast.
Yeah, that's how you can remember it. Look at that.
What do we talk about? Movies. Who is it with? Cory and Isaac.
CI, that's us.
Boom.
I appreciate that shout out, Ben.
So I'm going to feel free to plug myself right now. If you haven't heard the Postal Boys' newest album drop, and onlyest. Moose 2019. Look it up on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Music, I think too. Honestly,
The Pitchfork 200 best albums of the 2010s
Yep,
list. Also.
most influential artists, sexiest.
I think you should sexiest. You should probably tell them how to spell it because I don't think they'll be able to
Oh
find
yeah,
it.
so Postal, because we deliver them bars, so you know that the news. It's just Postal. Boys, we it's a fun play. We don't like to limit ourselves, so we it was a blend of everything. BOIYZ. Yeah, boys.
Right, all the. Yeah, what I really appreciate that is that you had to actually pause and think about it for a second before you spelled it out.
I had to see it, and then
POSTALBOIYZ, 2 words. Postal Boys. Spotify.
Moose is the album name.
Also, ABOUTMOVIESCI.wordpress.com. We got a ton of content up on our blog right now. A couple different things about horror movies that should help you out if you're looking for some fitting October viewing. Check that out. Social media, Ben already plugged that, so I don't have to do that again. Does anyone have any final thoughts about Joker or other things before we sign off?
Feel free to comment, send us some DMs, things that you think we could do differently or better, or suggestions of things to watch and things to talk about, because we're always looking for new topics and new aspects of film viewing life.
Yeah, you can hit us up through Facebook. You can message us on our Facebook page, our Instagram page, and also Ben's Hinge account.
Yes.
We'll be accepting messages through that.
Same name.
Yeah.
I think I want to just conclude that the movie really good. I think as I was leaving, I kind of wish I hadn't have watched it in the moment because it made me feel so bad. But I think it was a good thing. It makes you think, it makes you question. So, and ultimately, I'm glad I watched it.
A good sadness, as MGMT would say.
Good sad.
It's disturbing, but not in a gross out gore way. It's just horrible to watch.
So go see it. And then talk about it.
In a good way.
And talk to us about it if you want to. We're here.
As always, on my Hinge account.
Yeah. Ben's going to go back to swipe.
Should we say our zip code again?
No, we shouldn't. We should maybe cut out the first time.
Our address is...
Okay,
I already offered people to come visit us at our home if they knew the address. So.
Yeah, but now we're going to actually give them the address.
Oh, okay.
So
10-520?
No!
They'll be able to find us.
We're live, man. This is the radio. So, Ben, thank you for joining us on this episode. It was wonderful having you.
Thanks so much for having me in my own room. It was really just delightful to be here for seeing how the sausage is made. I'm a big fan of the podcast, been here since day one, so I really am just jazzed that I got to be a part of it.
If you want us to sign anything, we'd be more than happy to.
My ass?
We can make that happen. As soon as we sign off.
Woo! Watch out for those little streaming reviews that we've been doing. We have already seen the Endless, Green Room, and the Invitation.
Yeah, Invitation article will be up, I guess, by the time
it's already up. Yeah,
there we go. Because we're in the present.
We're in the future.
There'll be new blog content on the regular, and there will be a new episode next week, as always.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. Thanks, Ben, again, for being a wonderful guest star. We'll have you back at some point.
Thanks, Daddy.
Of course. Until next time, everybody.
All right, good night, Mom.
Good night.